If it feels like the world's spinning out of control, but not in a good way, well, you're definitely not alone. A growing number of people are noticing this same unsettling shift. More divisions, less tolerance, and the rapid unwinding of our social cohesion. Just go out and ask the older generation, and they'll typically tell you that they've never seen our political pendulum swing this hard or this fast in their entire lifetime. But it's not the speed of change that's alarming people. It's something much deeper. It's a moral inversion that leaves many people wondering what's going on and how did we even get here in the first place. And that's why I'm starting this channel, to understand what's unfolding and to explore ways that we can recenter the political pendulum. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Brian Kugelman, and in this YouTube channel, I'd like to focus on a number of themes. So let's go over them, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Let me know what you think about these, and if you have any suggestions on related topics, please let me know. So the first will be to help us make sense of moral inversions, and we'll be going through the psychology and neuroscience of how moral inversions operate. I'd like to talk about engineering of ideological utopias and dystopias. We'll go through the question of meaning and purpose, but how do these operate specifically in a polarized society? Now, a lot of us are facing incredible irrationality, so we're going to look at logic, rhetoric, and critical thinking. I'd like to make a clear delineation between unmasking the woke wolf in sheep's clothing versus actual social justice issues. And then we're going to learn from the activist toolkit so that I can help people who want to make a difference to win back the political center that has been lost. The next topic is the psychology of moral inversions. I've met so many people say that they just can't make sense of what's happening in the world. They can't understand why people glorify criminals and blame the victims, or why people claim to defend justice as they drive forward concealed injustice. What's most alarming is that this isn't just some fringe cult. It's spreading fast. It's spreading into major parts of society, into institutions, and even embedding itself within mainstream political parties. My take is that this is something we call a moral inversion. It's what happens when an ideology grips a group and seduces it with an intoxicating new narrative. One that flips the script on who's the villain, who's the victim, and who's the hero out to save humanity. Once the flip happens, racism, prejudice, and bigotry aren't just tolerated, they're actually normalized, and in some cases, even celebrated by those convinced that they're on the right side of history when clearly they're on the wrong side. Traditionally, philosophers have tried to explain this, calling it things like mass psychosis, mania, social contagion, mob rule, and there's a bunch of different terms that they use to describe this. But today, there's actually a new wave of science that's finally revealing how our moral emotions work and why we're just so vulnerable to ideologies. When we examine frameworks like critical theory, which is one of the woke research methods, but we look at it from the perspective of this new science and also behavioral science, we can see that it's not a neutral research methodology, not even close. It's something radically different. Critical theory is a blueprint for how we construct ideologies that divide people into groups, stoke conflict by agitating their moral emotions, and if this framework has had any level of success in a particular population, it can spread in society like a social contagion, changing the political landscape as it diffuses throughout different human populations. I've come to believe the old saying, the victors write the history book, is actually backwards. I now believe it's not the victors who write the history book. Instead, I'd restructure that quote. I think that it should go, those who rewrite history become the victors. And in rewriting history, what they're doing is they're engineering a cherry-picked new history, a new paradigm about how the world works. And that's one that shifts people's moral perspectives, and it changes how they think about the world and classify situations. And this is exactly where moral inversions are engineered. If a particular moral inversion is grounded in truth and evidence, then it's not flipping the script from truth to untruth, but it's going from ideally untruth to truth. And we have examples of this from the Renaissance and the scientific revolution, but in this case, we call it progress. But when an ideology is based on lies, it becomes a blight on humanity. We call these moral inversions mass psychosis. This is where ideologies spread like a mind virus, spreading stupidity and immorality. I believe that much of the political upheaval we're witnessing today is a result of a toxic moral inversion. It's not a progressive movement aimed at improving humanity. It's a regressive one, serving only interests of its ideological cult. But I believe moral inversions are easier to stop when they're grounded in lies, and that if we can better understand how they operate, we can develop better countermeasures in the hopes of recentering our political systems and managing this problem that does occur in every generation. The next topic is engineering ideological utopias and dystopias. The bigger picture in the culture wars is that we're witnessing competing visions from different groups about what they consider to be an ideal world. But the problem is that the fringe woke left is pushing us towards a social structure that a large segment of society recognizes, and rightly so, as resembling the totalitarian nightmare scenario described in George Orwell's 1984. On the other hand, the far-right conservative vision strikes fear in the hearts of liberally minded people, reminding them of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale and the authoritarian state of Gilead. Both extremes present visions of the world that many see as dystopian, just in different ways. And that's exactly why it's important to understand how ideologies function, how they spread, and how they gain influence over public life. Between these two extremes, I believe the most stable political system is what we've seen in recent history. Imperfect, yes, but it's functioning. And yes, it's being seriously unwound by fringe extremists on both sides. These groups are not only pushing their worldviews, but also weaponizing fear, both to rally their base and to demonize their opponents. That's precisely why we need to develop a clear understanding of how ideologies operate, studying how do they spread, how they manipulate and influence people, how do they take root in institutions, and how do they ultimately shape public discourse. Only then can we put in place the right measures to restabilize our social structures, ideally somewhere within this imperfect but vital middle ground. The next topic is meaning and purpose in our polarized society. I suspect that what really drives our civilization forward is a deep sense of meaninglessness and emptiness, an inner void that we're all motivated to fill. It's that search for meaning that pushes us to play our role in society and to find our place within the world. But this makes us deeply susceptible to ideological persuasion, because when life feels meaningless, ideology offers a seductive promise that we can fill the void with purpose, that we can write ourselves into the history legacy of our people's moral struggle against oppression. But more often, this is just a motivating lie. We see people who are convinced that they're on the right side of history, when in reality, they're on the wrong side of history. We see those who believe they are the victims without realizing that they're actually the villains. At present, I suspect that it's this meaning gap that makes us so susceptible to political persuasion. If we can come to better understand this dynamic, it could help us to mitigate the destabilizing vulnerability. So instead of being a flaw in human nature, it's something that we can address in the open, but it's hard to solve a problem you don't acknowledge. The next subject is confronting irrationality with logic, rhetoric, and critical thinking. Perhaps one of the biggest forms of harm delivered by the culture war is the erosion of ideological diversity in our academic institutions. Instead of promoting a diversity of opinions, many institutions now encourage ideological monocultures, intolerant and full of cancel culture. Studies now show that many sociology and humanities departments have discriminated against conservative-minded people to the point where they are nearly 100% full of politically left-leaning scholars. These departments have hijacked and transformed academic institutions into politically motivated think tanks. They're no longer functioning as the neutral spaces for inquiry, but instead they are used to fuel lobbying focused research aimed at reshaping public debates, media values, and that is being used to try and reshape our policy landscape. Beyond these blatant political biases, the biggest problem is that woke activism literature is often grounded in postmodernism. What's wrong with postmodernism? Well, it's just a philosophy of knowledge, something we call an epistemology, but it's one that rationalizes pseudoscience so that political activism can be disguised as impartial scholarly work. What's worse is that when you actually read the original documents from the Frankfurt School on critical theory, which is a framework that underpins many of the critical topics that we see in woke academic literature, when you look at that and you have behavioral science experience, you quickly realize that it's not a neutral research method. In fact, it closely resembles the types of frameworks that we use in behavioral science to influence people. It's a framework designed to shape how people think, feel, and behave. And please go out and read the literature yourself if you do not believe me. To solve these problems, I see two different paths we need to take. First, I believe that the key is developing a stronger understanding of the philosophy of science and where our knowledge truly comes from. Only then can we critically engage in debates about woke ideology versus scientific approaches and effectively discredit and refute pseudoscience based on postmodernism. This foundation is essential if we want to ensure that research influencing policy is grounded in evidence, not ideological bigotry disguised as scholarship. Second, I believe that we need to teach people more broadly the skills of logic, reasoning, and rhetoric. Yes, this is the curriculum from the Middle Ages, going back to antiquity. These are essential for constructing persuasive arguments that are evidence-backed and capable of countering the wave of ideological pseudoscience and irrationality that we're witnessing. I genuinely believe that the truth, or at least the evidence, is on our side. Woke ideology is built on so many contradictions and baseless claims that even with modest skills in these technical areas of rational debate, it's easy to counter arrogant, ideologically driven people and to refute them in every place where we encounter them. The next topic is unmasking the woke wolf in sheep's clothing. My biggest issue with woke ideology is that their social justice activists have hijacked the reputation of trusted and respectable social movements. I see far too many people falling for this illusion. As someone who spent most of my career working with nonprofit organizations, governments, and social programs, I want to be absolutely clear on one very important point. Woke ideology does not represent the civil rights movement. It does not represent the environmental movement. It is not working for social development and is not fighting for equality. Woke ideology is pushing pseudoscience to justify its politically motivated cultural Marxism, serving the interests of its own ideological religion, not the broader society. But many people can't tell the difference between those who are genuinely working for the betterment of humanity versus those who have hijacked the credibility of noble and important social causes. I want to help people see the difference. So far, I found that the best way to identify these fraudulent actors and to expose them is by examining them through the lens of moral hypocrisy. Those who are genuinely working for the betterment of humanity tend to apply the same moral standards equally to everyone. In contrast, Those who are blatant bigots hiding under the cloak of social causes often can be flushed out by their double standards, their selective compassion, and their selective contempt. The next topic is learning the activist toolkit so that we can rebuild our political center. I spent most of my career working in online social and behavior change campaigns, working from small grassroots organizations up to the global level. And over the years, I've seen how the activist and the social change toolkit can really make a big difference for society. And it's full of just so many practical techniques that you'll find in different approaches that it has that really can make it much easier for people who don't have a lot of experience in the field to go out and design campaigns and programs and interventions that shift how people think, shift how people feel about issues, and then ultimately what they do. But unfortunately, over the last few years, I've seen major abuses. I've seen more and more hate groups and extremist groups using the exact same techniques that I started off using in my career to promote environmental sustainability, community development, public health, social cohesion, volunteerism, all the nice pro-social campaigns that I was working on. Use the same toolkit that is now increasingly being used by extremists. And I've even seen now full terrorist organizations setting up activist-like networks to promote war and conflict. So now my big problem is that I'm well aware that when I can see obvious activism at play, a lot of people are fully blind. They don't see it. They don't understand the patterns, and they do not know how to deal with it. And so it's critically important that people start to understand how these techniques work so that we can set up effective countermeasures. And so what I want to cover also in this channel are basic activism and social change and behavior change techniques so that people can put up effective countermeasures. So what people don't realize is that if you're going to stand up to any other organized group of people who are pushing one ideological set of values and trying to push one set of policies, well, you can push back against them. Ideally, that's what an open democracy is. It's the discussion. But the activist techniques that are used are more effective when you have organized groups against unorganized groups. And so by educating people on this, I believe that what we'll be able to do is set up different countermeasures and improve their efficiency, improve the quality, share techniques a little better. And I think that one should absolutely follow the work of Sun Tzu and learn from your enemy, understand how they work, and build your strategies based on your understanding of them. But you can't oppose an opponent when you don't understand how they operate. So we're going to go through different standard strategies, thinking techniques in the activist toolkit, and hopefully you'll be able to share your opinions and thoughts on different directions that we go within this content so that together we can start putting up some better obstructions and then hopefully swing the pendulums right back to the center where it belongs. So those are some of the major themes that I'd like to explore in this YouTube channel. If any of this resonated with you, feel free to click subscribe and to stay on with me as I develop this subject. And also, I would love to hear your thoughts. So if you have any opinions about the subject that I've covered, any questions about it, let me know, because I'm looking for feedback so that I know how to develop the curriculum and content here. And if you feel that anyone else would benefit from this, feel free to share this. It will help me to get this channel going and off the ground. So until the next one, I'll see you soon. Bye now.